What's the link if I want to share this? I can.
Twitch.tv/Stillfleet. And I think we are live, FYI.
Yeah, cool. All right, let's just go live. Do it.
But yeah, I'll pop that in the chat too. Hey, how is it going, Tony?
Hey, pretty good, pretty good. It's been a month and a half, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I talked.
Well, I know you're a busy man. You have new issues of new comics and things. You've been traveling, meeting hoi polloi
Yeah.
comic readers, talking about your art. So thanks for making time. And yeah,
Sure.
I'm looking forward to chatting more. I thought that last discussion was really fun, and
Yeah, absolutely.
it's a different way to think about game design too, like taking an existing story and thinking about what about it would be fun to play through and how to show off your art, frankly. So for those who don't know, this is Why We Work. This is a new sort of series by Stillfleet Studio. We do Why We Roll, which is like a podcast with game designers. And we thought Why We Work we a little bit similar, a little bit different, like more formal and sort of working session with people whom we might, may be working with in some capacity. Kind of almost like could be co-working or brainstorming. In this case, it's sort of like, hey, my friend Tony's an amazing illustrator. What if we did a comic book of yours, but as an RPG zine? What would that even look like? Is that something you'd be interested in? So, sort of philosophical discussion about comics, graphic art, and story games and what makes kind of fun collaborative storytelling experiences. So, Tony, you were on, a month and a half ago, I think, to talk about HAZMATT,
Yep.
which is the book we'll be talking about, and coming back today to go a little deeper. And we'll just kind of go from there. So, it'll be a series we pick up. And hopefully folks find this kind of thing interesting. We have some more Why We Work stuff planned, but this is one I really want to do because I do think it would be personally a fun zine to put together, really driven by the art. So before I go any further, Tony, can you introduce yourself and maybe remind folks not only who you are and about generally your art practice, but specifically HAZMATT, which is a great comic series, and I'll drop some links in the chat. But generally, I mean, they can find you by googling Tony Chao illustration, and we'll link your website and all that. But yeah, what is who are you and what is HAZMATT? Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So yeah, my name's Tony. Tony Chao. I'm from Taiwan. I'm now based in New York. Been drawing comic books since about like 2018, and in end of 2019, I came up with the character HAZMATT, and after reading a series of like Bukowski poetries and I don't know, imagine the end of the world, I guess, and I came up with the character, came up with like an 8-page little silent short story. Essentially, it started off as just like a short, and then COVID happens, and I'm like, all right, let's run with it because the hazmat suit, like the gas mask and all that, it just seems very fitting. And it was also a nice little segue for me to, because I was finishing my MFA in visual narratives, and I was writing like a cyberpunk graphic novel that is pretty word heavy at the time, and actually just finished issue 2 for that, so that's pretty exciting. But at the time, I wanted to make something without any words and just like a little bit more colorful and more playful. So HAZMATT was like a great medium for that, and I think it started off more like episodic in a way. I just wanted a crazy world to play around with, which I think kind of fits in with how it would fit in with like a game system. And later on, as I drew more, like issue 1, issue 2, I got to issue 3, and I was like, all right, what's the story, like, and yeah, and then I think honestly the really meat of the story starts in issue 3, and you start kind of asking questions about who the character is and what's his background and why is this world the way it is. And it's not my favorite way to write stories, like the whole mystery box like trope, but I guess it just kind of worked out that way. And yeah, here we are, like 4 issues later. I mean, we're kind of, I don't want to give too much away, but we're left off in sort of a cliffhanger about HAZMATT, where he's gonna go. And yeah, I think I took like a year and a half off from working on HAZMATT because I was going pretty hard at it for like 3 years, and I switched gears to do Metabo, and now that I finished that, I think it's about time to come back to it. You know.
Yeah, it's definitely. I think would be a good time if we were sort of turning in a way issue 1 through 4 into a game, and then you have issue 5 coming out, so people could really pick up the story that's developing and it's going on its own path, and then they can play in the world, sort of the sandbox of this thing, and they get the vibe and share some of the art you'd queued up. I mean, you have tons of good art. It sort of starts with this
Right.
post-apocalyptic character, and then over time,
Yeah, that was
you
like
have
one of the
other.
first drawings I did at the time. Like,
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I think you might have mentioned this is sort of definitional, like who is this character, and you didn't even know yourself, right? In terms of storytelling, it's not only essentially picaresque, meaning like episodic stuff happens and Hazmat abides. He sort of
right,
keeps going, but also at the beginning, it's like really truly a mystery, and it was about color and just sort of drawing elements related to COVID-19 and the pandemic, and just like okay, it's a guy in a hazmat suit, what happens next, frame by frame. And so you're playing with space and doing a really good job, I think, again, of, breaking up space, all hand drawn and very, very cool colors. So I think a lot of
right,
it is gripping. And obviously, you've gone on and on. You've sort of added different levels of, fancy to this world. Added sort of mysteries. I think I don't know how many of these are canon versus just like fun things you're drawing on the side, but I think these stories of sort of Hazmat exploring ruins, finding sort of pals, fighting mutants. I mean, it's a genre of post-apocalypse that a lot of people like. I love, like Mad Max, etc. So I think it's like
right,
familiar. I think the colors alone are very trippy. They're reminding me of Arzak and Mobius, and we talked a little about that kind of vibe, the '70s stuff with science fictional elements, and then also just no words. So we have very little insight into the character. We just him doing stuff and
right.
sort of trying to survive. So that's kind of where we left off last time. We were talking about, well, yeah, is it, are you playing as this specific character, or are you playing as your own wasteland walker, your own survivor, who could be someone like Hazmat? Maybe you have a very different mentality, but at the end of the day, you're all like in hazard suits or space suits or something with shotguns or bows and arrows, wandering around the waste.
Right.
So, you're all maybe similar, I guess, in that sense. And so I think it's interesting to think about, yeah, like what elements you want to explore as sort of the base game that another person who's not you could pick up and tell their own stories with, and what elements you want to set aside as like this is specific to the comic book that you're developing.
Yeah,
So I
I
think
mean,
that's kind of where we left off, if I recall
yeah,
correctly. Yeah.
I think, I mean, the more I think about it, like, I almost don't think it makes sense to play as Hazmat as the character itself, especially if it's like, like a multiplayer type of game, and it's like a, you know, something offshoot. It kind of makes more sense that there's this world that exists out there, and then there's all these challenges and elements, and I feel like it allows the players to, like, all right, create your own character. How would you survive in this post-apocalyptic wasteland with mutants and robots and giant animals and whatnot, and toxic waste, and there is hazmat out there, like, as a, I feel like in the game, like, hazmat could be like an element of, he could either be a help or adversary, who knows, like, up to you how you play the game.
Yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, like, he could be an asshole, and he'll be your adversary, like, so yeah, that's like kind of how I'm leaning towards, and I feel like it would be cool for people to, like, yeah, how would you create a character? What kind of costumes, or like, not costume, but like what kind of equipment would you hold, and uh what will your backstory be? Like, how would you end up in this, like, post-apocalyptic world?
Yeah, well, let's talk about that. So maybe we can talk about some elements of RPs in general, and
Hmm.
then maybe you can respond with some thoughts on things you want to see. We were talking a little before taping about different systems, and specifically the system our company's been using, which I developed initially for a sci-fi game that's set in the far future with aliens and stuff, but that
Right.
has that kind of Dungeons and Dragons adventure base sort of gameplay loop where you go out, you do essentially adventuresome stuff, and then you come back and rest up. In this case, on an alien space station, you go back out and things change, and your relationship with your bosses change. You gain levels, which is abstraction, becoming more powerful, more skilled.
Yep.
You might get items. You might mess around factions, or piss off somebody. You might have side quests or romance, even, who knows. But that's kind of the basic adventure game idea. And so we made a system, myself with now many friends, that we think is really, really good for telling lots of different kinds of adventure stories. And HAZMATT seemed to fit into that in reading it, because it has that peak idea of like survival in the waste,
Right.
kind of trippy, from Arzak to Mad Max, kind of like, guys out here trying to survive, sometimes on a motorbike, sometimes with a weapon,
Right.
sometimes just kind of walking. So I think that'd be fun for many players to age with. I also think like the video games Caves of Cood, things we've talked about in the show that are just like really cool versions of that in different art forms, and I think has
Yeah.
really captures that as a comic. So in terms of elements, I mean, there's a few things I even in sort of repeating, like, okay, what is this story possibility? Like, what is the story space? One is you have to have sort of a player character, like who are you playing? And
Right.
we talked before taping about almost like solo games and choose your own adventure games, and maybe are there sort of stories? They're not necessarily linear, but they're more intimate and they're more specific stories. So someone's
Mm.
trying to go from A to point B. There's a zine that's about that journey, and
Yeah.
there's story elements that happen. There's randomness that happens, and at the end of it, you're there and you can keep playing, but the zine is over. Like you've done that part, and then maybe we do another one later. It's almost like a comic book issue format.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah.
that was just a random idea, but I think it's fun to sort of start with like, how much do you want to model basically to try to condense what I'm asking, like a big environment that's totally open ended versus how much do you want to play around with that kind of episodic, almost like issues of a comic book vibe. You know what I mean?
I kind of like what you just described right now. Because I feel like before it's yeah, I feel like before, if you were just like an open end world and you're like, all right, in this world, like going on some type of adventure, it's like it's almost too open ended, and yeah, like I'm it's hard to think of like, all right, you start somewhere, you're not quite sure where you end, and but I like the idea you just gave. It's like, all right, every zine is it's like a story arc basically, and I like that there's like a defined, not defined, but like a lot of time there is a defined antagonist in a way, and either it be the elements or like a actual human character or whatever, and it's something you got to overcome. And yeah, I feel like that's a lot more intriguing for me, and you can take that to the next scene, and that's always what I like most about like Hazmat when I was drawing it. It's like, all right, I got, like, it's not like, all right, he always has the bike and then he'll always have the bike, like he had the bike and it broke down, it got messed up, and then all right, that's gone, like it's like the fact of life. He had this weapon, and then shit happens, and he don't got it no more. He got to go find something else, and I feel like that's kind of the fun part about it. Like,
Yeah. Like low inventory games is the thing. I'm told
yeah,
my mic was sounding bad, so just one quick question, Tony. Do I sound any better? I tried one thing. Does it
it's
still
still a
sound crap?
little like it's got a little static like while you're talking. Yeah,
I think my mic's broken. I could just go with the computer mic and we could just see how that sounds. But that's
yeah.
basically my
Let's try that.
options at this moment. Okay, let me
That's what I'm
before I
doing.
do that,
Hopefully
so
it's
maybe let me ask a question if you can with me, and then you can respond, and I'll mess with my mic.
right.
I like that idea a lot of low inventory. Like every item really, really counts, and maybe that so often is paired with high deadliness. Like if you aren't prepared, you could really die, or also just like high lethality. Not necessarily you're gonna die, but like you want to run away, so
Right.
high danger. So it sounds like at least in tone we're narrowing down. And then I think to go back to that initial question, though, how much is this the kind of game where you build out a character and you have a lot of choices, or do you only have a few choices? Maybe some of those choices are around starting equipment, for example. So just to throw it out there, like, are there elements of building a character in this universe that you're interested in exploring? And can we maybe we can at least decide on what those elements are? We don't have to then list all the options. But in other adventure games, you have things like class. Like, what are you good at? Are you
Yeah.
sort of a knight who's tanky? Are you a thief who can sort of jump in and stab someone, but you're not able to like suffer a lot of damage before you die? Are you a magic user? Like those are like silly tropes that come up in games a lot. So is there some equivalent, or is it more like everyone is just like a human trying to survive, and it has a lot more to do with like what two weapons do you decide to pick? What stats are you using? So I don't know if you have any, if you want to riff on that, but I'm going to try to switch mics. So,
All right. I think the first element will probably be like, I guess, race, because uh in the world you have like the humans that are like not radiated, and there's like the mutants that are, by all accounts, they're like the infected in what you call it, and then 28 days later, and maybe they're a little bit more sentient than that. But and then there's like the robots, and then there's animals, and then animals have their own lives and agendas, and I feel like those are all like starting options, and then you choose one of those, and well, if you're an animal, I don't know if you get any items, but but you get inherent like skills, like, as like, if you're a bird, you can fly, and um but yeah, like, I feel like um it would make sense to be like, all right, if you're a human, you get one like one weapon with, say, one like survival equipment, and you're good at X, like, maybe good at one thing, and then you're like semi good at something else, like how we all are, like, in real life, like, and yeah, and then those are your stats, and then that's how you proceed with the game, like,
yeah, so maybe
oh, yeah, you
maybe
sound
that's
much
one way
better.
to do it is you have the four options for species: human, mutant, robot, and animal. And
Right.
then depending on what you pick, you either get you get different items and scores. And we talked a little about the grit system, and I can give a little summary of that, since we're about to start our first ever game jam. So we definitely are promoting the system. But
Yeah,
we
yeah.
could do a stripped down version. We can mess with it, right? We can hack it, remake it. But yeah, that would be a way to play with it. Is you could have a relatively small number of choices. So you really just choose like one of four things, and then within that, you might get, maybe you only have two or three sort of powers or items or cool
Right.
things, right? And depending on what you choose, you'll get sort of different outcomes. You'll be better or worse at different skills in the wild. Very simple ones would be things like being very tanky but not necessarily being able to do a lot of damage, or the reverse, DPS kind of builds, like doing a lot of damage but you don't have a lot of hit points or armor.
Right.
Another one would be having special skills to like sort of teleport or travel around. So maybe in this world, like having a motorcycle is like a huge deal, and most people are walking
Yeah,
around
yeah.
on foot, or flying, right? Like you said, if you're able to play a bird. And then other ones might be like food sources, like maybe robots run on sort of a very powerful lithium battery and they can power themselves through the sun or something, whereas humans have to eat,
Right.
animals have to eat. So I think there you could imagine beginning to play with that. The other thing in our games, we have grit, right? This kind of abstract idea of like being able to power through energy, etc.
Mm.
Um, Also focus. So sometimes in a more fantasy setting, a magic user might have more grit, because they're sort of spiritually balanced. They practice mindfulness to do the hell science, right? Whatever weirdness they do. So you could do something like that as well, where humans might have good items and more grit and certain score adjustments, but they're not as tanky, and they don't have any innate attacks, right? They can punch somebody, but that's about it.
Yeah, yeah.
Whereas a wolf can bite you, a mutant is now like a zombie, basically. So I think that might be a fun way to kind of really, really simple. You have four things, make them each cool, make them each good at stuff that's different, and then you can draw those things.
Yeah, I think,
So
yes, and I mean, I'm kind of leaning. Realism's like the wrong word for it, because we're getting fucking, we got like robots and mutants, but like, I feel like, as far as skills goes, like, maybe you have the knowledge of like how to like spot um like poisonous mushrooms or whatever, like stuff like that, and or you actually know how to start a fire, and someone that doesn't, they're gonna starve, or they gotta eat like berries or whatever, like, and those are just I kind of like those kind of limitations more than say like someone's like, oh, I don't know, or someone even like, oh, you got skills in martial arts, and you like end up in like a human to human situation, you have the upper hand, but if you're against like the elements, yeah, you're screwed because you don't know how to make a fire, like stuff like that, like.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. We have elements of that in our game. It's funny what you're describing is a little close to a game we did called Blister Critters, where you're fucked up little animals after an eco apocalypse, and
Mm,
there's like different food that has different values, and some of the animals can eat basically trash and get health and grit back, and some animals you'd have to hunt for like higher value food. You can't digest everything.
right.
And it doesn't honestly matter that much in Blister Critters. Blister Critters is an amazing game, and it's really well balanced. I think just because it's meant to be cartoonish, but also your animals, and it ends up like people kind of inherently get it because it's sort of simple. The food part, I think, is a great idea. It just honestly, when I run it, at least it hasn't mattered too much. But I think this game we could make it matter. Like we could build in from the beginning that, like we talked a little about cycles also before we started,
Mm,
Tony. And so maybe one cycle that really matters is like your metabolism. And so again, robots very different from a wolf or a human.
right,
And maybe the mutants, that's their big downfall, is like they're stupid and they have really high metabolisms, so
right, they gotta eat all the
uh,
time, like, and
yeah, so they can be buff and all these other things, but so I think this is a cool way to go. So you can use some of the existing elements, fairly simple resolution system, but you can divvy up those elements differently than anything we've done, at least, and keep it really simple. So a
mm,
smaller zine, there's only 4 kind of choices, and that means again it's faster to learn to play. So it's something that I do think would fit this style, where like there's literally no words in your comic. So I
right,
remember you
right.
saying, could we do a game with no words? I don't know if we can, but we could sure try to be radically minimalist, which is not our normal vibe in terms of words, but I love the challenge of like, what if we mostly had very short descriptions, of rules.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, yeah, I'm not quite sure how it would work without words in the game situation, because you gotta kind of describe the scenarios and whatnot, but use symbols.
Well, we could do more symbols. We could use, instead of writing out health and grit as little 3-letter, they kind of stand out, all caps, 3 letters in a lot of our books. We could
Right.
make just symbols, like a little heart symbol or a little like electricity or brain symbol or something. And, you could like develop the zine intentionally to be very much like choppy and something you have to piece together, which is a thing in game design. There's
Mm,
an extreme version. So I would say on one end you have D&D, Pathfinder. I would argue all big games, all crunchy games where there's a lot of shit to track. Um, they over everything is really long and explained in a lot of detail,
yeah,
and there's a lot of choices and all that. And not just choices when you're building a character, which I do think is different, but choices at the level of like every time you resolve something and roll the dice, there's like a reaction and blah blah blah. So there's that kind of style where you need big books, and then there's a style where like the game is not actually playable because it's just hinted at, which is there's a company
yeah,
called Hollow Press that does these beautiful art books that are insane. They're really crazy and fun, but they're not actual games. They're like fake supplements for video games that never existed, that are like JRPG style video games, and there's beautiful art, but it's like an art project, not a game. So you
right,
can't
right.
actually play them. So I think
Yeah,
I think it's weird because normally we lean, even though we make games that are super 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 simple, like you're rolling one dice and trying to get one number,
yeah,
but they look longer because I like writing and I started it. But I think it'd be fun to do one that's almost in the opposite direction, toward the hollow press thing of like it is playable, but it's very simplified graphically. So I mean that would just be like a crazy design challenge for you and maybe Tony Grasso and maybe Gay. I mean it's sort of like a question of graphic design, and how much you're doing the game part versus just would be sharing art assets.
for
But
sure.
yeah,
Yeah,
I think that's a cool idea, for sort of character types. And then maybe I think we talked last time they might be on the same journey, but they're using different skills. They're going different places to get there.
right, right.
And that would allow you to have a zine that has a clear beginning and end, and then the
Yep.
middle is most of it, which is players be players. They'll do weird shit, and you can let them explore different areas. So we can have what's called a point crawl with different
Mm.
locations. You don't have to go to any of them, but they do have some relation. Like some literally are better or worse to go to, but players don't necessarily know that. So again, the intelligence factor, like humans and robots, might be better at figuring out like I don't really want to go north into the endless desolation swamp or whatever. You know what I mean? And the
Yeah,
dog is
yeah,
just
yeah.
like, I'm a dog. I have no idea. I go to the endless
Like it
desolation
smells
swamp.
good over there. I'm
Yeah, it
heading
smells great.
that way.
So I think that's one. It sounds like what's coming together is a plan for a short zine that has 4 character options and then a bunch of locations, but it has a kind of not necessarily linear, but it has a sort of set like
Maybe like
T's
a
like a
through
goal.
line. Yeah,
Yeah, through line.
yeah,
Yeah, and then again, it could be just zine one of X, right? You could do more of these where like it's
right.
sort of a tight adventure, but it's also written in a way where it's like, yeah, I mean, it's Mad Max, it's psychedelic
Would
hellscape. Go play around.
would it make sense to say, yo, like say it's like a 4-person game or whatever, and then you or it can be more, and then you pick these different class or species, and then there's this location that all of you guys are somehow ended up in, and like it's like this desolate town and city, and then there's this thing, and then you guys have to get out of it, or something like that. Like, does that make sense? Or
Yeah, yeah, totally. I mean, I
and
think
they don't
one of
have
the
to you don't have to
things.
collaborate or nothing, but you could if you want. Like,
Well, it would be cool to do a game that is either solo or multiplayer, but isn't necessarily either. In the way that I
yeah,
think the Wasteland walking stories, right? The Road, The Walking Dead, Last of Us, these stories usually are about small groups, but sometimes someone ends up alone. And being alone is sort of there's a huge downside, but there's also sort of the idea that well, I trust myself, I don't trust anybody else, and that's a there can be maybe a trust mechanic that's simple or something like that. Maybe you instead of trying to charm other people, you're rolling. It's mostly about can I trust them or something. You know what I mean? And so
yeah,
I don't know. There might be ways to sort of take the same mechanics, keep them simple, but emphasize those elements. Because I think it would be cool if you wrote it where it could be played with a bunch of people, or you can just play it with one person and it scales. Like it's sort of fair no matter what.
yeah,
That might be hard to figure out, but I think that'd be fun.
yeah, yeah. Because I mean, I kind of had the idea of like a weird Coliseum type of game, like. And like I just keep going back to like Yu Yu Hakusho, where like the whole Dark Tournament arc, and I mean, as far as like the comic part goes, I've always wanted to draw one where like Hazmat ends up in one of those, and he's stuck in this town. He's got put in this Coliseum thing, and he has to like fight his way out of it. And part of it is a good excuse for like just drawing fight scenes, and also I like that whole little tournament um format, and also just setting wise, I feel like it looks cool. So like I don't know, like I feel like that might translate well into like a game situation. And I mean, tell me if I mean, I guess let me know if that works out. Like if that makes sense in your head.
Yeah, well, I think what one of the things you're describing, if I understand, is like a narrative structure within a narrative structure. So there can be a narrative structure that's a Picaresque feeling, but it's actually somewhat more directed or teleological. There's a thing you want to do, which is get to from point A to B. You know, A is unsafe, B is safe, or whatever,
Yeah.
however that's expressed. And then within that narrative structure, so it's like Matryoshka dolls. You know, within that you have the tournament because oops, you get taken to Fight Town,
Yeah.
and you know the raiders make you fight in Fight Town because that's when everyone comes to Fight Town, you have to fight, you know, or whatever. And it's the Yu Yu
Mm.
Hakusho tournament thing.
Yeah.
Um, Maybe there's some allies you can make. There's some cool items you can find or whatever, but also like it's super dangerous. Maybe there's a way to avoid that, and that's part of the point crawl. Like the point crawl could be weighted so that there's a sort of chance of different things happening, and it can
Mm.
be we could almost also graph make a cool map that like doesn't have a lot of words again, but has like sort of like board gaming mechanics, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think that'd be cool to have a couple areas that you're excited about, and you could write those. And again, some of it can be dictated by like what kind of end product or is this. So if it's a zine that's no more than 48 pages or something, you know, digest like half size letter. then you could say Fight Town or whatever it ends up being called is like 2 spreads. You know what I mean? So it's like 4 little pages. And then that's like a significant amount of the book, but it's not the whole book. If it's a really small zine, then it's probably shorter. It's like a paragraph. So again, it's how much of that like Yu Yu Hakusho, like DBZ tournament stuff, are you writing out or giving rules to versus just suggesting like, okay, now they're in a tournament, so maybe they fight someone. So some of this gets into like stat blocks, like for NPCs, like monster bad guy design, and how much of that is the narrative or story method, where it's like a bad thing happens, explain how you try to get out of it, and then is there a resolution for that, or how much of it is adventuresome fighting, which is a big thing in D&D all the way through. You know, I mean, a lot of our games have that modeled where you can fight stuff because it raises the stakes. It provides stakes for stories.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think?
I mean, I like that there'd be more structure towards it. I feel like it'd be cool, like, because yeah, I know it can be like, all right, that's part of like an element in this like quest, and you're in it, you gotta like fight out of it, and there's not, and it's just one little element in the. I don't know. I feel like I feel like it'd be cool to like have it as like a center, like obstacle, like, and then you get all the players involved in this one thing, and then there's a lot of elements to it, um and you kind of figure out, and obviously you can opt out, I guess, and or opt out halfway through, and somehow if you die, you die, and yeah, I feel like there's a lot of little things you can explore, and then like in between fights, like what you're doing and all stuff like that, and so I don't know. I'm drawn towards it. So
No, I think, well, actually, something you said made me think. So, what do you think about this, Tony? Like, you start no matter how many players. It could be one to, maybe it is 1 to 4. It's like canonically, you can either have 1, 2, 3, or 4 players.
Hmm.
But you basically, you have that first session or first like arc. I don't know. You know, we can talk about how it relates to IRL time later. But you have a bunch of characters and they're all separate. And then the middle arc is they're in the tournament. They all get caught and they're all brought to Fight Town, and they have to fight either together. Basically, they have to band together to defeat enemies and live. And then when they win their survival, their freedom, then they're a group of people. And I think what's interesting about that is it implies they're going to work together to get to the end goal, to get to safety. So if there's a
Right.
starting place A, safe place B, and in the middle is Fight Town, and
Yeah.
again, there's other locations, there's other stuff, but this is like the big level arc.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's interesting is, yeah, like you could have it so the mutant is like, ah, and just runs away, or the dog just runs away. You know what I mean? Like they don't
Right.
have to be a unit. And I think some of that would come down to different groups, and we could play
Yeah.
test it and see how that. Are
And
there
then dog could have
incentives?
just ate the mutant. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean it's PvP. Yeah,
Yeah. 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 Like, and yeah, like I mean, like I don't think necessarily all the players would be like on one team. It just doesn't quite make sense, in this kind of world, and especially if you're like different, like species per se, and it's like, I mean, each they have their own agendas and sensibilities, and you put in this kind of a pressure cooker, like how people react, and stuff like that, and
yeah, and it's funny. Vex mentioned also the idea of like maybe them not knowing the rules and the underwriting and the minimalism could be a big part of it. Of like they're brought, like the tournament brings together people who don't know each other and they can't perfectly translate, or they don't know how to work together, and they really might have different goals.
yeah,
But I do think for a lot of groups it would be fun. I do think it'd be fun to run it as a kind of what's called like a grinder. There's different ways to talk about this, but a filtering mechanism. You make characters, and then the ones that survive form a party, and they're now professional adventurers, and they go do adventures together. And to your point, they've had these relationships, these bonds forged in fire.
yeah,
So I think
yeah. That'd be more like a D&D type of situation, right? Like, yeah, like, and I mean, I don't know D&D that well. Like all my knowledge, I played it once, and all my knowledge comes from like Stranger Things. So like,
sure.
And
Well,
like,
and you could have different modes. They don't have
yeah,
to be. I'm just saying you could leave the door open for collaboration because I think some people might want that. But you could also say, look, at the end of the day, after you're released, like you don't have to fight together anymore. Whatever that weird tournament was, that's over. You won.
yeah. You,
Um, so I'll just show some more art just because the art's cool. But
yeah, yeah. Let me pull some more up, like just from my
I do
computer.
notice you draw a lot of animals in a more, to me, fantastic register, whereas the people tend to be these kind of like realistically they're not all like ripped, even, you know what I mean, like they're just kind of like survivors, and then the animals are like almost like more just fantasy sort of figures. So I do think that'd be interesting to lean into the animal aspect. The dog is a huge part to me of the arc,
Yeah,
the nameless dog. The robots too, I feel like there's going to be more robots in the future of Hazmat is my guess.
there. Yeah, I'm. That's what I'm thinking. Like the next. Yeah, this is. I had that idea of the sketches where I was like, yeah, let me do like a tournament. And you guys give them weapons and whatnot. I mean, I had a text here, but there wouldn't be text in the actual comic. But
Well, that's interesting. Can I ask Tony? So, do you often write with text and then remove the text? Because that is wild. Like you write out
no,
what
no, no, I
would be
don't. I
said.
don't. No, no,
Oh,
I
okay.
don't. Like this is like a one off. Like I've done a few drawings with text, but like, and I just, but no. In general, I work more image first, and then um even comics that I have that has text, like the text always comes last because like my brain just doesn't work that way. Like I don't think in as verbally as well as like visually, like if I'm thinking of a story, I kind of play it out like a movie in my head, and I basically storyboard it out and then turn into comic pages. And when I am storyboarding out, I'll think about, all right, who's saying what, where's the um how do you call it, like the like exposition, where does it go, and then like the words kind of come later. But yeah, like in general, it's I always think image first, image first.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I have to suggest that made me think of something, and talking with you about how the art could drive the storytelling of a game, and that sort of challenge, which again is a little different. Not to say we don't love art, we obviously do.
mm,
But I think even our artists tend to write out the stories more with that idea in mind of kind of D&D like storytelling, and then the art is illustrating that. I mean, it's literally how we talk about it, it's illustration. But I think in your case, it's almost more the reverse. It's like the art is the story, and then the story we're going to tell around the table is like touching on that or coming out of that. So I will say there's a game that does this by someone we like a lot, Laurie O'Connell, who's on the show. They had a game called Hieronymus that took, Hieronymus Bosch, the surrealist painter, Dutch Renaissance painter, um, and took basically Hieronymus's art and then put hexes over it. And it's a point crawl where like you just go through these weird ass paintings with all these little like demon chickens and stuff and just weird shit happening. And wherever you end up, like that's what's happening. And so the art is really telling you the story. And so I wonder if there's some way to kind of bring that mechanic into the point crawl so that we'd have some light rules. You make a character, but then depending on where you end up on a picture, and the picture is underexplained. We don't. If there's not like a little summary necessarily like normally I would write if I was writing an adventure. It's more like, yeah, I mean, look, you're by this tower thing. You know what I mean? And then the players have to kind of figure that out. Maybe there's some mechanics. The situation is given sort of a difficulty or something like that. But I do
yeah,
think it would be cool to kind of foreground your art. So I don't know if that sparks anything, but maybe that's how to do the map is like taking pieces of your art and putting them together to make like a kind of visual story without actually explaining how these places link together.
I think that's interesting. It's like maybe we could do like there's a map, and then within the map there's like when you get there, you go to a certain illustration that is like a more detailed version of that location, and then from there, visually it tells you clues of what you could do and what not do, um, and I guess everything you need to know is within the illustration. I guess I'm putting more work in for myself, but like, well, all the clues and all the like, I guess the quests that you need to find is like in in the illustration, I guess. And instead of, oh, like you get like a blurb of text of like whatever, you see certain things and players see the visually and decide, this is what I want to do in this environment and whatnot. Like, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I mean, I think it could be even like I
Might be
think
a
this
bit
came up
abstract.
last time with Tony Grasso. Like, how would we mechanicalize the art as a kind of challenge? And I think it'd be fun to have like a moment where all the players at that location, like maybe you're taking turns and if you're at different locations, then you're just doing different stuff. And if you're together, you collaboratively look at the art, and then that
Mm,
you each get to interpret something about it, and that becomes true of that place.
right,
And so maybe it can be more or less fantastic depending on whom you're playing with, and are they the kind of people who want it to be very surreal, or they want to do sort of hard sci-fi post-apocalyptic stuff.
right.
Um,
Yeah, it's silent anyway, so it's like up to interpretation, regardless. Like I feel like that was the fun part about Hazmat. I guess making it. It's like since there's no words and it's silent, I don't have to explain too much. Like I don't have to like think too hard about like the world building. Like yeah, I mean, I think about the world building and like whatnot, but since I don't have to like explain it, it's kind of up to interpretation, and you can kind of make shit up, like like lack of a better term, but you make things up, and then like when readers see it, they make their own connections of like, hey, this is what this and that kind of draws a connection, blah blah blah. You make up in a way the reader kind of makes up their own story that maybe I didn't even think of, and I feel like you can do that, translate that into like a gaming element. Like,
yeah, I mean, and maybe that's part of the like. So we've talked about a few game elements. So like, kind of what kind of person you are. We talked about these four types. Maybe we do have the scores in the pool from the base grid system. Keep them pretty minimal, and those are divvied up among the four types differently. In addition to items, and items are just a big part. There aren't a lot of them of useful stuff. So having a really good weapon or something is a big deal, or a motorbike or whatever. Food and metabolism. Another thing we could talk about is kind of like the equivalent of from what's called a magic system, magic or psionics. Like, is there an epicycle, like a new rule that is almost like game breaking? Like, the thing that defines it is that it is different than all the other rules.
hmm,
Or superheroes, I think would be the third one. So there's like magic, psionics, like, Stranger Things mind stuff. And then there's kind of like, do I have superhero abilities in a universe where that is not necessarily common, but normal, right? It's something that people understand.
hmm,
But maybe in this world, actually, there's like a meta version that's about art, and it's almost like there are meta moments where different characters can interpret the art and then change the outcome of situations, and it's through the art. And that does imply we're giving them a good amount of art. Maybe there's other resources they can find. Not to make it cynically a way to force them to buy your comics, although they should.
yeah,
But but maybe there's some other way. Maybe online there's like a patch of just like random panels or something. Like a random panel generator website where it
hmm,
shows you one at a time, just randomly. Maybe there's 100 or 200 in there, and that's enough
right.
randomness. So these are things we could test. But I think it'd be cool to have that kind of mechanic where like almost like you can break the game. And again, maybe it costs grit. That's a common way we do stuff like that, sort of magic-y stuff. But force people to like do a Pictionary or whatever. Like or not. That's not the right categories. Categories. Like you look at a piece of art and you have to kind of like
You do an
unpack
interpretation
it.
of it.
Yeah.
Mm. Yeah,
I don't know exactly, but yeah.
I mean, even like say I don't know, like you see like you get put in a scenario of like say one of the illustrations with you find like the kitty one, like and you see your character in like a abandoned city with like a cat, and then just like all right, story goes on from there, and you play the game, and like I feel like you get given like this scenario in illustration form, um and or even like the bats one, and then you're like, all right, like now you gotta deal with it, and that's like and and we can substitute you can just take out the hazmat and the dog in this scenario, and it's like, all right, now your character's in this scenario, and bang, what next? You know, like
Well, it'd be interesting. Yeah, I mean, following what you're saying, like, instead of usually you'd have like this stat block, like the bat, and the bat has a certain name and maybe even some background, some story information, and then there's
right,
stats. Here you could just have like the panel, and the panel has like a threat level or like things that happen.
yeah,
Characters have to make a certain kind of check. Maybe if it has, if the panel has like obviously there's some sort of villain of some kind, and they have like health, then like you have to defeat that much health or run away. You have to leave
right,
this area.
yeah, yeah,
So basically, you do have a fight, and there are stats, but we don't explain who the fuck these bats are or what they want, and like
yeah,
maybe arguably you can calm them down. Like maybe there's a couple options, and there's just different difficulties for like fighting them versus befriending them, which is very
right,
unlikely. But hey, if that's your thing and you're good at it and you really want to do
right.
it,
You have
maybe
the
that's
stats
interesting.
for it, yeah,
Yeah. So that would be a way to write again that's super minimal on the writing and very art
yeah,
forward, I think, where we kind of take different set like basically again, I'm proposing a point crawl where we take your art and then we just sort of lightly assign some stats to it, and then players can go from sort of art to art and then
yeah,
interact with it. And we could sort of test what's the minimum needed to have fun versus someone just being like, I don't know what you want me to do.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's
I
play
mean,
testable,
I feel like if it's like say this illustration is like it seems pretty actionable, especially if you're put in like the like hazmat's like like position, you know, like there seems like there's things that like you most people can kind of figure out like you got to deal with some bats that don't look very friendly, you know, like but and I don't know, some like maybe like you're hanging out with the birds and like do I share the food, you know? Like, like maybe I just want to eat it myself. Like
Yeah, I mean, maybe they're also like even because that's one of the advantages to me of playing these story games with very binary rules, which is you can fail. So like it
right.
could be an easy check, but like you just need to not piss off these giant mutant birds, and they look friendly and they look like they're not going to attack you. But if
Yeah,
you roll and you fail, there's a bunch of them and they're huge. So it sort
right.
of
All of a sudden
changes
they
from
turn on you. Yeah,
yeah, it's like a silly. It goes from a silly vibe to a serious vibe.
right.
And that's with Ethan Goldini, one of our collaborators, another artist who's a game coming out called the Sometimes Kingdom calls haha uh-oh. Like instead of basically starting serious and it devolves into silliness, which is how a lot of D&D goes, we try to start sometimes with somewhat goofy premises and then it gets deadly serious, and we treat it
Mm,
like hard sci-fi. Like we treat it like, okay, this thing looks like it's a 6 foot tall bird that weighs more than a human would, and there's a bunch of them. um, if it's hungry, it's going to take your food. So I think
right.
that would be easy enough again to kind of somehow give just enough stats, just enough direction, but really let the art speak. And then again, maybe a lot of it, I think a lot of where I would want to spend the words would be on that bigger structure of like you're on a quest to just survive or get somewhere,
Yeah,
and oh, there's a big set piece in the middle that can bring you together. That's a sort
right.
of game within a game, right? That narrative structure within a narrative structure of the tournament, and then
Yep.
after that, there's some resolution, some ending. So those, I think, like there could be 3 points where there's like a page or two of text, and then a lot of the rest of it is like,
Let the picture do
what
the
is
work.
going on? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And then I feel like the zine could almost it won't be a comic book for sure, but it almost could function like it might almost look like a comic and just like it's pictures after pictures where you're in the scenario with your characters and now you're like um I guess you're interpreting what character you made up in this like illustration scenario and maybe and I guess then you figure out like the cause and effect of each action you have from that, and then there's other pictures that lead from that, or different illustrations that like there may be a good outcome that lead to that from the bird one. It might lead to the bat, you know, like you fucked up with the bird, now you end up with the bat. I don't know, like you know, like
Right, and that would be explained somehow with some minimal words, but like the
right,
storytelling proceeds in that way. Where, so this gets actually at a core question we haven't addressed, which we should, which is there a referee? Is there a chronicler, a GM, a game manager? or is this the kind of game where it's called GMless, so the
Mm.
players are distributing those functions among themselves differently. They're refereeing the rules and they're telling the story collectively without anyone kind of conducting or the orchestra, right? So in traditional like D&D kind of games, the GM is doing a few different things, simple things like timekeeping
Mm.
or meta things like timekeeping, safety, consent, sort of checking in with people about, hey, is everyone tired? Should we stop here? But the real core of what they're doing is like two things: refereeing and then the kind of narrative conducting, which isn't
Right.
the same as dictating what happens, but so it depends on your group. And are you 12-year-olds doing a set D&D book, or is it like adults having this kind of deep, long form improv kind of storytelling thing?
Right.
So here we could have a GMless game where the book gives you the guidance you need, and you just go around and you take turns, and there is no one person who's orchestrating. And instead, maybe it's all the players can agree, like, hey, if there's a question, everyone can decide collectively. So if you Tony and I are playing and you're confused about something, then it's now up to both of us. Or if there's certain elements when everyone's called in, like the Greek chorus, to sort of give their opinion or whatever, add a detail. So I think that would be one way to do it. Which again, we could try to like be minimal, GMless, like a very different style. Most of the games we've published, again, are more maximalist and have GMs.
Mm.
But this would be the same system, and I think it would be cool because it would be very focused, like you're saying. It would almost read like a comic book.
Yeah.
Or like some almost like that weird like I keep shouting at that one company, Hollow Press, that makes these things that kind of stand out because they're in between a lot of genres. Like you pick them up and you're like, wait, what is this? Like your brain like really wants it to be in one of those genres, and it's just not a comic and it's not a game.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Somewhere in between. Yeah.
yeah, so I think that could be fun. We could always try it, and if it like it's always easier to write more, I think, in certain ways.
Yeah. 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 I mean,
So
like, I think I'm probably leaning towards like what you just said, like without a GM, and I just I don't know. I feel like it's like a game like this that's already like seems so wordless and up to interpretation, and now you all of a sudden have an authority figure that like tells a story. It kind of defeats the purpose, like. But I don't know, like obviously, like, hey, if somehow without that, it like the game doesn't work and like it's doesn't function, then yeah, maybe we gotta pivot. But that my instinct is like, hey, let's. I don't know, like it's already kind of experimental, anyways.
yeah,
Might as well lean
yeah.
into it, like.
No, well, that's cool. I like it, and I like the idea to go back to something you've said early on in this conversation and in the last one. And maybe Hazmat is there as an NPC, but
Right.
maybe in the same way we do some like the bats or the big birds. It's like, when you encounter Hazmat, he just like he has sort of difficulties, like the difficulty to befriend him, the difficulty to beat his
Yeah.
ass, and he's maybe like a boss, and maybe again is not explained why he's in the scene, why is he good or bad. So it's almost like you're intersecting, it's almost like you're playing through an issue of the comic that's like a
Yeah.
side issue that you wrote because you would be doing the art, but it's not actually an issue. It's a kind of way of experiencing, of kind of going through this world, that would be random and different every time, and like say if this works, then maybe there's other zines that have a similar approach with sort of this point crawl where there's stuff drawn. So I think there's a lot of like possibility to that style if it works. I think some version of it definitely can, and it's probably more just like making sure that it has enough for players to have fun and not
Yeah.
feel
Yeah.
frustrated, but still
Right.
feels minimal and true to the spirit.
Yeah.
Um,
Maybe like test run a couple times before
yeah.
how it works out. Like.
So with that, I mean, in terms of process, that is, we definitely would play test. To get to the play test, people play test different ways. We usually try to write out kind of a full thing and then get some people together and play through it.
Yeah.
It
Makes sense.
depends. You can break it down for sure. I think it's a little harder with something like this, where it is visually driven. We'd almost need, as opposed to doing the art at the end, illustrating the concepts that are written.
Right.
Again, we're kind of reversing it, and you'd almost have to give us the point crawl, the art, the
I
chunks of
mean,
like
yeah.
the
Yep.
locations. And then we could sort of say, okay, how are we going to mechanicalize different interactions here that is simple and fun? The part that would be written down would have to be sort of written, I think, for sure, is the character
Yep.
creation. We'd have to say, okay, but even then, we could do it from art. You could pick key art for human, mutant, robot,
Yep.
and is it one or more kind of animal? I mean, I don't know. Maybe there's options. Maybe there's not.
Mm.
And maybe on top of that, we try to layer on without being unreadable, but sort of minimally, right? Layer on like what stats that thing has. So I'm just thinking next steps. Those would be some of the ways to sort of progress through this. If we like the zine that we're kind of describing in the air right now.
Yeah, I mean, like it's kind of funny because it's like this go back to how I make comics instead of like writing things down first. I'm going image first again, and yeah, I feel like it'll make sense to like, all right, if I do like a big picture of like say like a big map, and then I draw, and then I send you guys like I don't know how many like there's the Coliseum, and then there's like 8 different locations, and then within the location there's like each location has 3 extra like scenarios and whatever with like or characters that you might encounter in those locations and might be in the illustration, and then you have and then you have the characters selections with like the mutant robot, and then you can figure out the stats and what are the options, and yeah, and then from those pictures you guys can piece together the game, and like I, yeah, right, like it's
Yeah,
yeah,
no, that's exactly right. I mean, I think we could
yeah,
also do it here if you wanted to do it on the stream, or we could do it in between, but kind of check in and have a bit of a work sesh,
yeah,
and invite some other people too. That's another thing. Often, again, we do is depending on who is in charge of the game design versus the graphic design versus the art, which aren't always completely separate. You know what I mean? But
right, right. I mean,
they
each
can be, but
element informs the others.
right, but we could have on folks and we could talk through the process that way. And it's slow roll it in one sense, but in another sense it would be fun because it doesn't mean we couldn't do more work between sessions, but we could have some streamed examples of like, for example, if Tony were helping with graphic design for a game specifically, you the two Tonys, you guys could connect in a different way because you'd be talking
Mm,
artist to artist and
right,
somewhat different concerns about legibility of the art reading, but also like, hey, we have to fit on these words, um,
right, right.
and so on and so forth. So I think we could have like different kinds of not even before you get to playtest, different kinds of ways of as you said, you could give us some key art, and we could begin to collectively figure out who's writing descriptions of things or rules for
Yeah,
things and how much that can be kind of pared back or held back, because my impulse is always like, okay, if it's a point crawl, there'll be 20 locations, and we'll write at least a nice paragraph about each. But no,
yeah,
there's 8 pages of art, which maybe is a single hero piece, or 3. You do these sort of cinematic, modern graphic novel style, film strip kind of panels,
right,
um, and each of them needs some rules, but like, how minimal can we make the rules? And there's no explanation, as you said. So
right, right,
I think
right.
it'd be fun to test that minimal version and see like, it's
Like how
almost
far we
reminds
can
me
push
of
that, like yeah,
yeah, and it reminds me of dream genre games. There's a game called Dream Punk by a creator named Zavid who uses tarot, and it's like you're just meant to be pulling up these kind of tarot cards and going through a dream, and the world around you just keeps changing randomly, and like you can like kind of forcibly can change it. It's something that Tony Grass and I've been talking about too, making dream games where that you have random elements and you can lucidly change them, but there's still a lot of randomness. And how do you model that? And I almost feel like this way of doing it, maybe not full dream, but like surreal, could kind of help us like test that out, right?
yeah.
Um,
I don't know, like love the word dream punk. It sounds sick.
it's a great right. It's a great name. It's a cool book. It's a really cool book.
Yeah,
And so we started our version Dreamtime with playing cards and whatever. Without getting into it, I mean, it's like it's something I think, not to speak for Tony G, but we were talking about that idea of like levels of randomness and control, and having it not be about dice rolls and traditional. I chose my class, the thing I'm good at in a fantasy world. It's like, nah, man, like you're kind of this melting squiggly guy. So I think
right.
having it related to the art a different way, um and to the point Vex made about Yu Yu Hakusho, where the rules are unclear, and having that be fun tension as opposed to annoying or frustrating, is I think something we can kind of work on. So blah blah
Yeah,
blah, that was just a long way of sort of underlining, I think, some of the things that to me sound fun about this. Tony Chao, it is 9 o'clock. Do we want to sort of move to like some wrap up takeaways and just also shouting out some of your other great work and things like that?
Yeah. I guess I feel like we nailed down quite a lot from today, as opposed to last time. Like even more. I think last time it was. I mean, I think last time was the first time I was really thinking about how to kind of materialize this into a game, and I feel like this time we kind of narrowed down a lot more to like what kind of game we want this to look like, and like the process of it, and um I mean aesthetics is not the right word, but like the aesthetics of the game and of how the mechanics is going to work in one way or another, like and yeah, and yeah, I feel like it's exciting, like it's almost like making a comic book, but not really. Like it's like comic book with extra steps, like, and then I feel like it's
Yeah, yeah. Well, the rules are in a different place because I think in comics you're creating rules for your art and how the art will transition from one panel to the next and how people will interpret the characters, right?
right.
And here we're creating rules with usually writing with language that's written out. But obviously, we just talked about trying to do it in a slightly different way, emphasize more icons and have more restraint and be more mysterious. But yeah, I mean, it's still at the end of the day, it's you're telling someone, okay, where does the story lie? What are the sources of tension? And the main difference is that with a graphic novel, no matter how weird and experimental, I mean, someone is going to read it in kind of the order you want, just page to page. I think it would be
You might give me
hard
a
to.
second.
Yeah,
I got
yeah,
the doorman calling me. Give me
yeah.
two
Go for
seconds.
it. And yeah, so in games, obviously, that's not the case. So when Tony gets back, we will wrap up. Um, I guess I'll just say now for anybody checking this out live, we have more Why We Roll coming at you. We're going to have a very, very busy spring. So basically every week we have either a podcast, taping, stream, or a lighter, more informal brainstorming session planned. Yeah, and Tony, we'll have to pick some dates and have you back. I think if you're down. So
Yeah,
I
let's do
guess to
this.
close this out, yeah, we'll talk offline about scheduling. But why don't you tell us just in general what you've been up to and how people can support you? And I think you're going to be in Chicago soon. If people want
Yes.
to meet you, and otherwise, yeah, I'll just drop some links and we can kind of go from there.
Yeah. So for the most part, I've been making comics. I have another series outside of Hazmat called a Metabo. It's a cyberpunk series, and I did the first issue back in 2021, and just now this year, like this past April, March, end of March, I finished issue two. Took me like 4 years to get started on it again, another year and a half to like work through the second book, but I guess the exciting part is that I got the next 3 or 4 issues of the story planned out, and I'm not like, because last time was like I finished like issue one was kind of like a thesis project for like a master's program, and I just wrote that. I didn't really know how to what's I know what comes after, but I have ideas of what comes after, but I don't have like a concrete idea. But now I have like a concrete storyline of like where it's gonna go all the way to the end. So I think going forward, it's gonna be a lot quick, not quicker, but it's a lot more concrete and better timeline. So that is something I've been kind of promoting right now because it's my latest work. And yes, I'm gonna be in Chicago this Saturday, Sunday for this comic expo called Cake Chicago. It's a Chicago Alternative Comic Expo, and yeah, it's in the Irish American Heritage Center in Chicago. I'm not quite sure where that is, but like I've never been to Chicago. This is my first time. Yeah, so also, if you got any recommendations for food or bars or whatever, feel free to send them my way. And yeah, the rest is you can find me on Instagram, the Real Chow Man, CHA, the Real and CHAOMAN. I guess we got it listed on the chat here, and I believe I have a TikTok page too. My wife handles that. she just grabs whatever on my Instagram and she posts it on TikTok. So it's mostly the same things. But and yeah, my website is TonyChaoIllustration.com, and you can find my comics on the web store on my website. And yeah, and if you're in Chicago this weekend, come by and check it out. It's free admissions.
Yeah, very cool. And yeah, if I were in Chicago, I would do that. Otherwise,
Yeah,
I'll catch you in Philly or New York one of these days. But yeah,
I definitely
thank
got
you
to
so
come
much
down.
for coming on. And I do that is a whole nother thing we can talk about is like speeding up, getting better, refining the craft. I mean, I don't know if people are interested in this intersection of comics and RPGs. I am, so that's we've had you on. We've talked a little about with my friend Eric Grunhauser, who's written some comics and written about comics a lot and played games. But I think it'd be interesting to kind of continue exploring how do you do this and yeah, maybe hear from you because you're at the end of the indie creator as well in a different genre, but sort of nearby storytelling.
Right.
So how you've gotten better, and I know in terms of publishing as well, we've talked a little about the business side too. So just to shout out that like I know it's that is a whole other nightmare you have to learn, even if you're really good at drawing or writing or whatever. It's sort
Right.
of
That's a yeah.
unrelated skills.
Yeah.
Speaking of social media wives, yeah, 100%. It helps to have people who are better at marketing than you around.
Yeah.
So, Tony Chao, thank you so much for hanging out, and we really do want to have you back. I definitely think this scene is something fun and would be honestly just a lot of fun to put together as a different kind of project. I will say
Sure.
it could be cool to do it as part of our game jam. The game jam runs all summer,
Yeah.
runs
All right.
through mid-August. Even if it was like a teaser, right? We could do like 4-page thing or something.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, if people want to get involved with Game Jam, it's a great chance to use the system and kick its tires. There's a free system reference document, SRD, and there's now licenses, commercial third-party licenses for all the games. So if you want to use our existing games, you just have to basically credit us. That's basically it. So you can check that out at itch, so itch.io/jam/grit system game jam 2026, but it's easier to Google it. Yeah, we'll be on with more YB rolls and more YB works. And thanks everyone for watching. Thanks Vex as usual for hella good ideas.
Yeah. Thank
Um,
you.
and yeah, Tony, I'll hopefully see you soon.
Yeah.
Um,
Absolutely.
Till then,
Thanks
I'm
for
gonna
having me.
yeah, of course. Thanks for being on, and we'll talk more Hazmat and maybe Metabo in the future. So
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
bye everybody.
Take care.
Click and end the